Good evening. It's been a while again. I had many things to do, and I'm as well, like everybody else, under the rules of the pandemic. So this is a recording that I was planning to do, and some friends of mine told me, why don't you start with the real meat? What is the real meat? Christianity. Christianity is, well, at least was, and maybe still is, one of the most widespread religions, and people are interested to know, its origins, and there's many videos and articles, and there's a lot about Christianity, and still, with all that there is, it's almost like a mystery religion. So I decided I'm going to start doing that one, and then you will tell me, you will give me your comments and so on. So let's share the screen, and then because the channel is a small channel and I don't have many options here. My email is 7lifebooks@gmail.com. So if you would like to send me any emails, suggestions, maybe suggestions how to improve or how to expand this new channel. It's a very small channel. Then all is welcome. So I will start investigating the origins of Christianity with you, and I don't know how many parts that will take. It might be 2 or 3. I hope not more than 3 parts in total. Because I'm not here to try and make money. I'm just here to try and fulfill my curiosity. And hopefully I have some people that will, on the internet or on the net on the YouTube, that will like to hear what I'm thinking about subjects and how I'm investigating them. So let's start. I just write first, and then I try to talk about what I'm writing. So most of the articles or YouTube videos that are investigating Christianity are intermingled with New Testament text, which in my eyes makes it difficult to distinguish between fact and fiction. Why? Because the New Testament itself is not an absolute historical document. And you can watch many YouTube videos, you will see what I'm talking about. In this investigation, I will be taking a different approach in investigating the origins of Christianity. The basis, like all the other investigations that I've done, is archaeological and historical facts, and thereafterwards their interpretation. I will try to find out if the New Testament corroborates the findings, and if not, the possibilities for why there is no corroboration will be investigated. So when I will present to you some of my major finds as we go along, and which led me to the assumption that the New Testament writings were tailor-made for a political religious purpose. And I believe that it's a wide range of time. It's between the mid of the 2nd century to the beginning of the 4th century. You will immediately understand why I do not believe that any of the religious stories are true. And that's perhaps one of the main reasons why other people who try to investigate Christianity, and there's a guy named Dr. Richard Carrier, which you can see his YouTube videos, he calls and he defines Christianity as a mystery religion. Because really it's very difficult to find out how it started, by whom, and why. There's many things that are difficult to find about Christianity. In my opinion, of course, Christianity is still very fascinating because it embodies some deep philosophical Jewish ideas, okay, I call it with a touch of Greek and Roman philosophy, and I will explain it as we go along. You will find out what I'm talking about. And I believe that these things were further developed to eventually become the basis of the Western society morality. And some of these ideas, of course, have been abolished by Western society in recent years, mainly ideas to do with the general sexual freedom issues, the LGBT communities, abortions, and individual liberties in general. I'm going to still use Christian historical writings to try and find out if they support any of my assumptions regarding the development of Christianity. As first, a philosophical movement, then afterwards as a religious and political tool. Okay, this is the normal statement that I just declare that all the pictures and the maps are from Wikipedia or Britannica, and they are used for education purposes. So, the first thing that I looked at is trying to find out what are the earliest churches, archaeological findings of churches. Because according to the Christian belief, the first churches were founded in Asia Minor, you know, where Turkey is today. And especially the island of Cyprus, where Paul had his first missionary expeditions. However, the archaeology dates all the churches in Cyprus to the 4th and 5th century, which is way too late. What is more revealing are the churches in the desert parts of nowadays Jordan. Church of Aqaba, which is dated at 293. This is the picture of that church. And if you look at where Aqaba is, that area was inhabited by the Essenes Jewish sect. They were spread all over the Jordan Valley, and let me explain what I mean by that. That's here is Aqaba, there by just the tip, just next to the sea there. If you go along this area, you will see the Dead Sea here, and if you go along a little bit further, you will know here, somewhere here is the city of Jericho, and above that, you will see the Sea of Galilee. So all this area, which was towards the desert, you know, Jordan is, you know, it's some of it's semi-desert and some of it's harsh desert, the Judean desert. There was a Jewish sect, which was called the Essenes, and perhaps you already know about the Jewish sect. And they had special beliefs, which we're going to come to and investigate. But these beliefs are interesting because some of them are very similar to the Christian beliefs or the Christian churches. And I will talk about it as we go along in our investigation. So this is the church that I told you, the Church of Aqaba, and some of it is in the Sinai, which is further along to the left. Okay, so the Sinai Desert. Then there is the church near Alexandria in Egypt, which is dated to the 3rd century to beginning 4th century. This is that church. So this is the church. It's close to Alexandria, and Alexandria is very important because Alexandria was the biggest Jewish city, in effect, the city where there were the most Jews at that time, even more than Jerusalem. And many people do not know that, but Alexandria was a very heavily inhabited by Jewish people, and it looks like, as you will see further down, Christianity had a big influence there. So we don't know yet. We will find out, or we will try and find out if some of the Christianity in actual fact started there. It's a possibility. We will look at this. Then after these churches that are the most ancient churches, you will find the Holy Sepulchre and the Nativity churches in Jerusalem and Bethlehem. I didn't have pictures of these churches, but you can look at them on YouTube. And these churches are from around 320 AD. Now, these churches it's very interesting because these churches were built on sites that the church claims that Jesus supposedly died and born. So he was born at the Nativity Church, where the Nativity Church in Bethlehem is today, and he died at the Holy Sepulchre. I think I'm spelling it wrongly always, but that's the church that he was supposed to die. Now, the stories about these churches are recorded, and they were recorded by Eusebius, the Bishop of Caesarea. The sites, according to Eusebius, were miraculously found following dreams of the Roman Emperor Constantine the Great. He sent his mother to Jerusalem. That's what Eusebius tells us. And together with Eusebius himself and Macarius, which was the Bishop of Jerusalem, they found these two churches. Okay, they had some signs, some cross signs that they found, and they found that these were the places of the churches. And funny enough, there were temples, Roman temples for Jupiter at least in the site in Jerusalem. I don't know about the other site. And of course, they decided this has to be gone, and we're going to build up churches. Now, look, this is 320 AD. Okay? So what we see is that the churches are from the late 200s to early 300s. Okay. If we look at the stories, and then of course there is a Christian church in Capernaum. Okay, in Hebrew they say Kfar Nahum, and they claim that this church is built on where Jesus started his teachings and so on. But there's lack of archaeological of any signs, okay, of any archaeological signs in Capernaum. Now, the mythological, I say it can be historical or mythological. Jesus has started his mission there. Now, we don't know yet if it's historical or mythological. We're going to try and find out that as well. And but in Capernaum, a much later dated church is built on an archaeological synagogue from the 4th century. So there was an archaeological synagogue found in the 4th century there. Now, this church is a very popular pilgrimage site, but its archaeology clearly shows a synagogue and not a church. Okay, and this is a picture of that Capernaum 4th century synagogue with its columns and so on. Notice the Greek architecture, because you will know that at that time Greek was the prevalent language in what they call Syria, Palestine. Okay, I say one of the claim by many devout Christian believers will be that Christianity was a persecuted religion, and people who practice the religion in hideouts or homes, and therefore archaeology evidence of early Christianity cannot be found. I would say that this argument does not explain why many small Jewish synagogues and even small Roman sect temples, such as the temples of worshippers of Mithras, which was a Roman deity, were found in abundance. There were quite a few synagogues from the 4th century, okay, and even the temples of Mithras that were found, archaeologically found, but no churches. Like I said, the churches, the earliest churches are the churches in the desert, okay, where the Essenes were, and close to Alexandria, where there was a big Jewish minority. I would say it was a very big, significant minority. They claimed that a third of the residents of Alexandria at some stage were Jewish people. Now, at that time, I think when there was a church, there were not many Jewish people anymore. It was a mainly Christian community, which, okay, again, dates to somewhere at the late 200s. So I would say that from an archaeology perspective, there is little to suggest that Christianity was properly established much before these years, 175 to 300. Now, even in the Roman historical literature, it is properly mentioned at around 250 by the edict of Emperor Decius. Okay, he ordered sacrifice to the Roman gods by all inhabitants, and he specifically included Christians. So some earlier records of Christianity by Pliny the Younger at around 112 does not give any significant information. We don't really know exactly who are these Christians that he's speaking about, because there's no anything that tells these are Christians, that they believe in a certain thing, and he just speaks about Christians that are singing into the night. And then there is the Tacitus account about the Emperor Nero setting fire in Rome in 63, and then executing Christians. But now this account is believed by many academia people to be a Christian church interpolation in order to date Paul's death, St. Paul's death. Because the Christian church had in their possession all the Roman historical records, and this is good, because at least this is good that these records were preserved. However, because they had these records, they could interpolate these records, because sometimes they would make a copy out of a copy, and then in the copy they would just add a little bit something to predate the religion, in order to comply with the stories, So if you have a story, you want to confirm it, okay, say, okay, I have a historical record here. We're going to take that and we're going to add something small, something that maybe people will not notice, but here we will be able to claim, look, we were here since the year 64. Anyhow, many of the academia by now, many professors and doctors understood that because sometimes these interpolations are out of context. When you read the historical document and so on, and then suddenly you see something which is out of context, then you realize that maybe somebody added it in there. Okay, so let's look at the literary evidence of early Christianity. So we looked at the archaeology, and the archaeology shows us that it's sometime in the 200s, probably late 200s to early 300s. So the Gospels are what most of the Christian believers relied upon as historical documentation over many, many years. And even today, some highly respectable researchers, such as Dr. Bart Ehrman, he has as well a lot of YouTube videos. They show time and again that the Gospels cannot be fully relied upon and are full of contradictions. That he shows from the one side. However, even Ehrman, Dr. Ehrman, is categorically captured by the conception that the Gospels are kind of a historical documents, and that the Gospel of Mark was the first Gospel. probably written at about 70 to 80 AD. Now, this is personal. I could never really tell why he and some others would hold this view, apart from the fact that they would be out of a job if it would be highly suspected or even found, or categorically found, that Jesus or his disciples may have not been historical figures, but allegorical ones. So when you keep that mystique that, yes, the first gospel was Mark, although the Christian church tells us that the first gospel was Matthew, then you kind of keep the idea that perhaps Christianity did start in the first century, and perhaps it was a little bit later, and perhaps Jesus was a historical figure. I still don't know exactly if Jesus was a historical figure or not, but you will see as we go along that the evidence points a little bit to a more an allegorical figure, but you will judge for yourself. So I will show with extreme probabilities that most of the disciples' figures are fabricated from other historical Jewish figures. Now, if you look at Paul's epistles, even Jesus' historicity, you know, if Jesus was historical or no, is dealt with indifference. And it might point to that it has been an allegorical figure. According to the Christian tradition, well, it's in the epistles, Paul did not meet Jesus personally. And when he was asked by others about Jesus, his answers were a little bit evasive. It was kind of, what difference does it make if Jesus was real or not? His teachings are important. Now, of course, Paul is right. That's what's important, his teachings. But and that's important especially for religious people, and that is fully understood. However, us secular people, this question is very important because we try to find out what Christian archaeological historical documents exist before we try to analyze the issue of the historicity of Jesus. This question is important for us because we want to know if, like other religions, like Judaism, which I showed or I will show, there are many stories. And then, although I respect the Jewish religion because I originally was born Jewish, I have a lot of doubts about the accuracy and the complete truth about it, you know. And if you read my philosophical book, you will understand that I do not believe that any God has been revealed to anyone at any time in history. So, and now, if the question of God or no God, if you tell me that all the universe and everything else within it and so on is kind of a God with some inner system, I would tend to say that although I don't know, I would agree that it might be possible. But that's it. Anyhow, the oldest intact New Testament manuscripts is important for our investigation as well. And they are from about 1,670 years ago. There's what you call the Codex Sinaiticus. Okay, they found it in the Church of Santa Catarina in the Sinai. And it is dated at around 350. And then there's the Vaticanus, Codex Vaticanus, which is also dated at the 4th century. They don't know exactly when. They're thinking probably sometime in maybe the mid 4th century, 350 as well. However, it's very important to look at them because the Codex Sinaiticus and the Codex Vaticanus, they have the entire New Testament in them. However, both texts have phrases that were omitted and others which were added. And when you compare to later standard manuscripts of the New Testament, you see that. And it's important because it almost looks like at some stage, even at around 350, there were still adjustments made to these texts. So we don't know again exactly when they were written, but it's suspected that this is the time, around the 300s, maybe early 300s, maybe mid 300s. We don't know yet. We don't know. Now, what other archaeological documents there are? There is the significant, the insignificant. I would say they are insignificant because they are card-sized fragments, such as the Papyri 52, which corresponds to some writing of the Gospel of John found in Egypt, and it's dated 125. And I would caution all these datings because usually it was done by what you call biblical researchers, and many times they like to as well to date it earlier. So they say 125, but in some places say maybe 125 to 175. So I would keep, I would keep caution. And then there's a new one, which was a P137, which has a few lines which are identical from the Gospel of Mark. Okay. Now, what is actually significant is what they call the Nag Hammadi manuscripts, which were found in Egypt. It's an extensive cache of manuscripts which include various philosophical and religious writings by what has been labeled as Gnostics. Okay, they are considered as a sect of Christianity. The dating there has been 150 to 300. And this wide range of dating is really questionable, as these manuscripts look as old and of similar style as the papyri fragments that I spoke about. Now, I would think again that there's a religious bias here, since these findings put the Christianity origins in a completely different light. And we will see what I mean by that. And what is interesting to me are the fact that all these findings come from Egypt, again from Egypt. And there are only about 100 to 150 years separating these manuscripts from the Codex Sinaiticus and the Vaticanus, which were probably written around the early to mid 4th century. Even if it's 200 years, I mean, the Codex Sinaiticus and the Codex Vaticanus are really in very, very good condition. And these documents that come from Egypt, the Nag Hammadi, are not in bad condition, but they look older, but they're only 200 years, say. So this is 1,670 years versus 1,870 years. Now, I ask myself, why would the dating of Nag Hammadi would be such a wide range of like 150 to 300? And that's because nobody wants to put his name on the line, what you call, and everybody looks at Eusebius. You know, Eusebius, he wrote, his writings, they form the basis of the church history, and he writes around early 300s. Okay, and it's very interesting because most of the knowledge of the church or what happened before comes from him. He is the sole source. Now, when he writes about the Gnostics, because he acknowledges the Gnostics in his writings, and these writings are extensive and about the Gnostics. And we have to remember who was Eusebius that wrote these things, and he was instrumental in finding the birth and death places of Jesus in Bethlehem and Jerusalem. Okay, so in his writing, The History of the Church, Eusebius dedicates some extensive writing space in refuting what he calls them heretics, the Gnostic and especially a person by the name of Marcion of Sino, which Eusebius tells us that he lived between 85 and 165. Now, Eusebius quotes some church leaders, notably Tertullian, from the late 2nd century and the early 3rd century, who refute Marcion. And what is the main issue here? Marcion was a member of the church that actually left the church, and apparently, according to the stories, he put a lot of money into the church, and the church says, no, we gave him his money and we told him to go. But he is the first one who, it looks like he is the first one who published a canon of Christianity. And it seems to be the first Christian canon published. Even according to Eusebius, he doesn't mention anything before that. Now that canon was important. Why? According to Eusebius, Marcion was the leader of the church who left the church and established his own school of Christianity in Rome. And he had only one gospel in his published canon, which was called Gospel of the Lord. Now, from some academic reconstruction based on Eusebius' accounts, so they took Eusebius' accounts and saw what he wrote, and this, because he put sentences, Marcion said that, his canon had this, and then they found that gospel looks like a shortened version of the Gospel of Luke. So that's all Marcion had. And now Marcion died at 165. So if we assume that this is the correct dating, although, like I said, everything has to be questioned, but if Marcion published it, he couldn't publish it when he was 15 years old, which is the year 100. So I would say at least when he was maybe 30 years old, so that's a year 115. So if Marcion publishes a canon at a year 115, which has only one gospel, which looks similar to the Gospel of Luke, okay? And this is more important, he believed that Jesus had only one apostle, which was Paul. And Paul received all the knowledge from Jesus and spread it via his epistles, which were 10. So that's what Eusebius tells us, that in Marcion's canon, there were only 10 epistles. And which ones are missing? It's the 3 pastoral epistles were missing. So if some of this info that Eusebius wrote is right, among many questions, 2 major questions come to my mind at least. First, why would Eusebius spend so much energy refuting Marcion 150 years after the latter's death? Secondly, why were the pastoral epistles missing from Marcion's biblical canon if he so much revered Paul as the only apostle? So the immediate answers that come into my mind was that it was important to refute that philosophy because it was probably widespread still in the year 300. So that's why Eusebius spent his energy to refute it, to push the new Christian narrative with the Gospels, Mark, Luke, Matthew, John, and of course, to refute Marcion's ancient canon, okay? And of course, we don't know, Marcion can't defend himself and he can't answer us. Maybe he didn't even know about Matthew, Luke, and Mark, and these people. He only knew about Paul. But that Eusebius would not tell us, because maybe Eusebius, either he knew and he doesn't want to tell, or even Eusebius didn't know. So he says, no, Marcion knew, he probably knew, but he decided not to believe in them. So he believed only in Paul. Anyhow, the pastoral epistles that are missing, the answer might be that they mainly deal with the relationship between the churches of Syria, Palestina, which is, the Nativity Church and the churches and the Holy Sepulchre Church and so on. And between these churches and the churches of Asia Minor, you know. And why were they not in Marcion's canon? Because they did not exist at that time. Like I said to you, the churches in Asia Minor did not exist. And probably maybe it's a possible answer that the pastoral epistles were written later in order to commit the support of the Asia Minor churches, which are big and rich, and it's written there. You are rich, and we are poorer here in Jerusalem and Bethlehem, and we gave you Jesus, you know, you must give us back support, financial support. And if you read these pastorals, you will see that these things are there. So at 165, when Marcion died, there were no churches in Asia Minor and in Syria, Palestina. In Syria, Palestina, definitely not, because we know these churches were discovered by Eusebius, although maybe they will tell us again, there were churches in homes and maybe small churches, but there's no archaeological evidence for that. Then there was another heretic which is mentioned by the name of Valentinus. He is kind of accused of leaning too much toward Greek philosophy because, as you will see later on in my investigation, you will see that in the formation of Christianity, there might have been some Greek philosophy as well and some Roman philosophy. And I wonder if it is possible that early Christianity was more of a philosophical movement that eventually turned into a religion. I mean, I have my views already about that, which I will explain. And I will go into this when we progress in our investigation, into the account of the historical background of the 2nd century. The history background will guide us there, and this will come in the second part. So there's many, many things that I still have to explain and bring forward so that we can understand the picture of how Christianity was formed. And I would say that it's a whole process that took place from the early to mid 2nd century up to the beginning of the 3rd century. Okay, so what do we know else? Well, from the knowledge we have about Eusebius and his interaction with the Emperor Constantine and Constantine's mother, it is obvious that he was the major figure in Christianity at the early 300s. And since then, his stories cannot be confirmed, and most, if not all, of the knowledge on history of the church emanates from him. Now, this thing reminded me something which, when I was dealing with Islam, and when I dealt with the research on Islam, and there was the writings of Al-Bukhari, if you saw my videos, and they formed the basis of the Hadith and the history of Islam. So these were writings that were mainly done under the Abbasids hundreds of years after the historical Muhammad. And this is interesting because Muhammad has historical evidence from the Christian church, while Jesus has no historical evidence from the Jews at that time for a long time, and you will see that. The Christianity just suddenly appears, and then when I say suddenly, among the Jewish literature, it just suddenly appears, and from the 4th century, the Jews start having a problem because they're becoming a minority, a dwindling minority, and Christianity takes over. Christianity is winning, and it won. It won the battle between Judaism and Christianity at that time, because Christianity not only won, it spread into many countries, especially Europe and many other countries, while Judaism remained a very tiny minority type religion. So the writings of Al-Bukhari was under the Abbasid Caliph Al-Mutawakkil. So between Bukhari and Al-Mutawakkil, the writings were finalized. and many of them contradict other historical evidence. Most of the stories there in the Islam are biased towards the Abbasids' rule. Now, based on that, should we blindly trust the sole source? We have a sole source again here with Eusebius, and he's directed by the Roman emperor like Constantine. Does Eusebius is completely based on his knowledge, or does he add his imaginative thoughts at times, especially when knowledge is absent, the same as Al-Bukhari probably did? Furthermore, some of Eusebius' writings confirm that Emperor Constantine changed fundamental traditions within Christianity. And one of them is the Sabbath day of rest. It was changed to Sunday. And the Jesus crucifixion had to be worked now from a Roman calendar so that it doesn't fall on the Jewish Passover night, because that was the tradition. The Jewish Passover night is the day of crucifixion. And that was openly written in Eusebius' writing, and he said that Constantine said, why Christians should do anything to do with these despicable Jews who were responsible for the killing of the Christ. So what can we glean from the Nag Hammadi? Okay, so this is an important thing, but let's go back to the Nag Hammadi. What can we glean from the Nag Hammadi manuscripts? You know, to take into account that they may actually be the oldest Christian writings as suggested by some academia members. Okay, so the Nag Hammadis, they seem to be the oldest Christian writings, probably from the mid to 2nd century. They have none of the known Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but within them there are phrases which are used in the Gospels. They have a Gospel called the Gospel of Thomas, okay, which is actually Judas. Thomas is like the new name for Judas. And the Gospel of Thomas speaks about Jesus and Judas. So, and the general theme is that Judas learns morality from his, I don't remember if it was his twin brother Jesus or his brother Jesus. Was this perhaps the general intention of early Christianity? The rigid, outdated, and notoriously rebellious Jews must learn from the new modern Christian people. And these people, who were these Christian people? People of mixed ancestry. It's historically, this was a real situation, especially in Alexandria, okay? People there were Jews, at the beginning Greeks, Phoenicians, Romans, Egyptians, and it is historically recorded that the Jews were the most problematic for the Romans. They were always rebellious. They were the only religion exempt from sacrifice to the Roman gods because they were considered religious fanatics and generally exhibited the will to die rather than do this. So at some stage, even the Romans gave up and they say, okay, you know, you don't have to, because you are unique, you have only one God, all the others have many gods and they can carry on sacrificing, you are exempt. But at the same time, they still had rebellions with the Jews, and there were many wars, as you know, and we will talk about it in the next episodes, and we will see how these wars affected the creation of Christianity. So, although some respectable research have shown that a paragraph in the book about Christ called the Testimonium, that's the Josephus, the Josephus is another document that is important, and there is a testimonium there, which is believed to be a Christian interpolation. But if you look at the YouTube videos, there is a researcher, is an independent researcher like myself, although he probably seems to have a lot of money to spend on a film, which he called Caesar's Messiah. In his film, he draws parallels between the Roman army movements during the war against the Jews and Jesus' movements as written in the Gospels. He claimed that the Gospels were written as literary warfare against the Jews, and that is why the Romans are portrayed in good light within the Gospels. And many themes are there in order to not resist the Romans, such as giving the other cheek, one slapped, give what belongs to Caesar, and all kinds of phrases that will make the Christians not resist the Roman Empire. Now, although Atwill's arguments of parallels between Josephus' writings and the Gospels are quite remarkable, I would say, at times they seem beyond the imaginary and hard to believe that such a military secret would not be revealed at some stage. Moreover, the Romans eventually adopted Christianity hundreds of years later, and the whole feeling that I get from is a kind of something that borders a conspiracy theory. I can't say if Atwill's, and there were quite other things that didn't sound right. Although I would say that Atwill definitely has a point. Josephus' writings have a lot to do with Christianity, even though the testimonium itself might be a Christian interpolation. And I will show it as we go along. And that's what I say. I do, however, agree that Josephus' writings are instrumental in unlocking Christianity's secrets, and I did find some deep answers to the Gospels within them, answers which I will reveal in the following parts of the investigation. Many sites, events, and people's names were borrowed from Josephus' writings in order to compose the Gospels. Now, I will end this part of the investigation, and in our next part, I will start with a general overview of the history during the first centuries, and in particular, looking at the Essenes Jewish sect and highlighting the facts which may have led to the formation of Christianity. Then we will investigate the variations and the meanings of the name Jesus and their relations to the Jewish religion and New Testament. Now, you have to know that the New Testament was written in Greek, and some of the terms, even the Jewish names and so on, were almost written by Greek-speaking people, you know? So they had to take the Hebrew version or the Aramaic version and almost make it like a Greek. What I mean by that is Jesus, is Jesus in Greek, and that S at the end is generally attributed to a male, and maybe the name was Yesu. And now Yesu, Jesus. This I'm just giving you on the tip of the, it's just the tip of the investigation, and you will see when it comes through in the next episode, you will understand what I'm talking about, and then hopefully we will expose and reveal the history of Christianity. Thank you very much, and I hope that you enjoyed this episode, and the wait was worthwhile, because I haven't done for a while a video, and I hope that I will do the next one sooner rather than later. Enjoy, and thank you very much, and God bless you.